Hello, I'm Kalpana Singhal, founder and CEO CXO TV from Techplus Media Group. Welcome to this interesting fireside chat on endpoint security, which is security from home to the enterprise. As employees are still working from anywhere in a hybrid work arrangement, endpoints continue to multiply and connect from anywhere. Security teams are required to scramble and protect both managed and now more unmanaged devices than ever. This fireside chat will discuss the trends of attack, new hardware and software security solutions, and how to build a strong defense on the device in the enterprise and the cloud to protect the endpoints. Please welcome Mohit Gupta, Group Chief Information Security Officer, Motherson Group, to help us explore how enterprise controls, cloud controls, and the home office controls come together to secure the remote user experience. A very warm welcome to you, Mohit.
Thank you, Kalpana.
Well, in the context of today's topic, like COVID-19 has caused the relocation of employees from office to home, just expanding the attack surface. Mohit, how do you see the threat landscape expanding for organizations with distributed workforce?
Well, certainly the threat landscape has changed a lot in these past couple of years. In many ways, first we need to acknowledge that this pandemic-related disruption is different from the traditional business disruptions that we all had been witnessing for past so many years. Say in scale, when traditional disruptions or say business impact was too localized, limited to a specific firm, to its location, probably to a geography, to a specific supplier, or to a say third party. But have we ever thought that everyone would going to get impacted? This so-called pandemic-related disruption had impacted all geographies, all suppliers, all locations, all of your vendors, all of your customers, and almost everyone in the world. So irrespective how much diversified you were, irrespective how many geographies were you present in, irrespective where all your customers were present, all were impacted. Talking about domain, but traditionally business impacts was limited to say a few hours, to possibly in certain scenarios, possibly to a week maximum.
Yeah.
But this pandemic, we had witnessed a year-long impact, which is where we witnessed wave 2, wave 3, and so on and so forth. And we still don't know if at all we'll witness a new wave, isn't it? And then there are obviously workforce shortages, capacity limitations, velocity of impact across business functions, and many similar things. In security field, as we talk about zero-day attacks, this COVID-19 attack, I always say that this is a perfect example of a zero-day attack in reality, wherein again there was no cure available when it hit us. So fundamentally, at this outbreak, most organizations had pre-established BCPs, their contingency plans to obviously ensure their operational continuity. But such plans obviously did not cover all that I just talked about, which was all uncontrolled and evolving variables, right from supply chains to widespread lockdowns to capacity issues and so on and so forth. So I personally believe that word has changed and will change even further.
Yeah, absolutely. While the attack surface was already difficult to manage, and the move to remote work during the pandemic changed it again, literally overnight.
True.
So, offering security to endpoints distributed across the locations has been a major challenge for organizations. And what is your strategy to secure systems in a distributed network?
See, we all had some or other layer of security for endpoints. And since we are only talking about endpoints, but it certainly that this threat landscape has changed with newer dynamics covering not only the endpoints, but all sort of endpoint devices, where it includes servers, laptops, mobile devices, your OT systems, your IoTs. Like in our scenario, there are sensors on the fleet. So effectively, IT is on the road, on the move. So effectively, this whole threat landscape has changed, and we obviously all had to adjust our strategy and to an extent adopt newer solutions, so-called new next-gen solutions or new generation solutions to secure this new distributed system ecosystem. So in principle, we always focus on endpoints of all types, but at the same point of time, user identity as well, which is very, very important, because that is where the complexity even multiplies multifold. The complexity of with endpoint is different, especially when we could talk about personal devices of varied security postures. In pandemic time, nearly all enterprises, if not 100%, if not 50%, at least to some degree of percentage, allowed BYOD, their personal devices to be used, and they all had different security posture. What do we do to adjust our security posture for all these personal devices, which itself was having its own security posture? We didn't know whether the personal device was updated with the security configurations that we expect. We didn't know whether the antivirus was being deployed on those endpoints and those personal devices which were being used by our employees. So we went for a refreshed risk assessment covering all endpoint types, all identity types, irrespective whether it is a local user, a local admin, or a privileged account. But then to be able to address all of it, we obviously had to pick some of the solutions. Since I talked about next gen, so it could be in the form of EDR, MFA, PAM, advancement in SOC to be able to gain the speed, especially around those SOAR use cases. So we again went ahead and refreshed our overall incident response plan to even cover more aggressive response mechanisms, with special focus around this privilege, support, and end users as well.
Yeah. So, what are the solutions, and from which all, I would say, who are your technology partners for these enterprise mobility solutions? Definitely for using these BYODs.
So again, there are a variety of OEMs that we involve. In a conglomerate like us, it would be too hard for me to define which particular OEM, but we nearly use all OEMs and nearly all technologies which are nearly essential for endpoint security.
So, do you also have some of your own technologies?
Yes, very much. We have nearly about 20 odd different custom applications which are there, which we internally which are not only used for our business applications, but otherwise also for our security needs. Because irrespective of what we do, especially when it comes to integration, there are a lot of middlewares that we have to create to be able to have this, to be able to gain the speed of how do we respond to adverse situations.
Yeah. So, offering security to endpoints distributed across the locations has been a major challenge that we have discussed. So, how do you enable a balance between adequate security and access and employee experience?
I'm reminded of one of the statistics that highlighted that about 36% of employees find ways to bypass organization security policies. And this was very interesting to me. But important to understand is that why do they do it at first place? Why do they bypass organization security policies? Well, if you go into the root, the problem is when employees are using their devices, and that too, when they bypass these security controls, they do it in a very risky ways. I guess that they do it to find convenience, which is more important to them than the security controls which are adopted by organization. So, be it when they do online surfing, be it when they use one application over another, be it when they want to probably install some application bypassing again some of the controls that we may have. So important is that we need to respect, and we need to pass on this respect back to the end user to again understand why are they actually doing it. And again, important is that uh, mm, not only we adopt the technology, but we evaluate the technology in such a way which strike the right balance between convenience and security controls that we want to adopt. So for endpoints, we all talk about EDR and solutions like XDR and so on and so forth. But not going into too much of details how this to be implemented, how to choose our right technology. We need to, yes, fairly understand that user convenience should be one of the criteria in in the way we evaluate technology. Again, but again, in the context of what you asked, I would like to talk about two important foundational areas as well. First is we must respect the need of employee convenience. For sure, end user convenience should be one of the criteria that we not only, as I said, incorporate in the way we evaluate technology, but in an ongoing manner, how are we monitoring our security control implementation? There is certainly nothing wrong in passing on that respect back to the end user. Why don't we go back and do a quick review of all those recent privilege requests that our end user have asked or our user class in general have asked and we rejected in the name of security? Can we not identify alternative ways how security can be implemented which doesn't bother end user, which
Yeah,
maintain
absolutely. Yeah.
which maintain the right balance? But equally important, I guess, that the second foundation that I must highlight is protect the employee identity also when you strike this balance in user convenience over security. Like for instance, a lot of people deploy controls like 2FA, at times MFA. So picking up technology is one aspect of it, but how effectively and efficiently and smartly are we implementing that technology is very, very important. Can we not create those rules which ensures that if at all my user is already logged in, say in the morning using MFA, and they are operating in the same environment using the same device, and there is no abnormality in its behavior, so can we not integrate SSO controls into it? Can we not have technology evaluate and detect any abnormality in the authorized user behavior also? So again, as everyone highlights, security by design, so security during evaluation also becomes important.
Yeah, of course. So the last few years have seen the highest number of security incidents and data breaches, in spite of stringent regulations and increased security capabilities. So in such a scenario, do you think there is a pressing need to update our incident response approaches? What should be the updates in the incident response approach for organization to make itself resilient enough to identify, prevent, and recover from any disruptions that may arise from new threats, vectors, and attack techniques?
So, very interesting point again. See, data security and privacy regulations are evolving across the world in many geographies. Alone in Motherson, there are about 100 odd regulations and contractual obligations, which makes our compliance framework very, very complex. And there has been a need in timely reporting these to regulators also. Like for instance, in India, I'm unsure how many people do understand that IT Act also demand us to report any of the security incident in a timely manner. Again, the time frame, if I recall it right, as per notification, again is around 72 hours. Similar is in GDPR. Now, US also has come up with a draft law which is to enact. I'm unsure whether it is already enacted, no, but past couple of days there has been a lot of buzz around. So these timelines are coming up in every geography, almost in every country, almost to report again to regulators. And if at all we are to meet those timelines, do we not need enough strict and speedy mechanisms, response mechanisms, through which we first involve relevant stakeholders within, do draft our response mechanisms to regulators in a draft mode first, deliberate that, involve relevant stakeholders, including your insurance bodies, including your business stakeholders in certain circumstances, your user class also, and your customer and supplier class also, if at all they are also a equal stakeholder in that particular instance, and then report back to the regulators. So I guess the speed is of essence, and you rightly use the word resilience. That can only be done when we make sure that we incorporate all these aspects into the plan itself. So we need to plan very, very deeply, very, very effectively, if at all we don't know, we should involve experts around and make sure that we incorporate each of such element and prepare ourselves for the worst.
So, do you think emerging technologies can act as an enabler to cybersecurity, or are they just an added area for concern for the CISOs? And how can organizations utilize such technologies to strengthen their cybersecurity posture and gain a competitive advantage?
Well, no one would deny that these emerging technologies are certainly important. See, the ultimate objective is to lay down a strong foundation to build not only a scalable but agile cybersecurity landscape, which has the ability to seamlessly adapt and respond to any of the sophisticated cyber attack that happens in any of the environment, and obviously to adjust with newer threat landscape. But let me focus on the core principles rather than getting into technologies, because technologies could be many, and then each enterprise has its own business needs, has its own tolerance level, has its own security posture as is, and the desire to be. So, but these core principles always remain same. Like for instance, I always focus on four core principles. The very first is security by default, which is a cultural change to incorporate security in the solution planning itself. As I said in the previously also, that we need to incorporate security at the time of evaluation. Whatever we choose at the planning stage itself, we need to involve. We need to think security. We need to incorporate those security controls in the design stage itself, rather than thinking it after implementation or during implementation, because then your whole architecture would going to change. So that becomes very, very important, security by default. Then I guess the second core principle is defense in depth. Yes, an attempt to go as deep as it is possible in the design itself, as we may possibly to deploy necessary security controls nearer to the workloads and embrace the latest technology, again, the emerging technology for more efficient operation. Speed is of essence. Make sure that your security control should not become deterrent in the way we respond to any of the attack. So while we embrace defense in depth, but we need to also see that the speed should not be hindered because of these core principles. The third principle I always admire is the solution and any of the technology that we adapt should be scalable and agile. An articulation in the way the solutions are evaluated, are implemented, are institutionalized, not only in the way we implement it, but we provide support that takes care of today's needs as well as future need of business, and agile enough that if at all tomorrow your business need changes, you should be able to adjust those technology architectures to an extent that it addresses your growth needs, your change needs. The current technology, if at all it doesn't support growth, would we be able to scale it up? The answer is no. Would we be able to have the agility in the way we design those security policies for different organizations because they have different needs? Answer would be no. So again, cloud versus on-prem decisions, build versus buy decisions are to be very much incorporated when we talk about core principles of scalability and agility, not only how it is to be adopted for today's need, but also for future needs. And last important core principle is resilient by design. Again, not just to focus upon how to get back uh, to business after something goes wrong, but important is how do we position the business to elevate the brand equity if something goes wrong and gain and sustain the stakeholders' confidence. I guess that is where the answer towards resiliency lies, and it is important that we stay focused in picking up these core principles when we choose any of the emerging technology.
Yeah. So also adding to it, like organization need to take an operationalized approach to security intelligence, not just to respond when there is an attack, but also to know exactly what line of defense to take, how to defend themselves, and from where they are defending themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So despite the best security measures, there is a high probability every organization will experience a breach at some point in time. What are your suggestions on our cyber resilience strategy and tips to help CISOs that will help recover from incidents quickly with minimum possible damage?
Well, to a large extent, you are right. Threats and attacks are inevitable, and when a sophisticated target attack is there towards your enterprise, I guess my hunch is that there is a higher success rate. So no matter how much you prepare, how much you plan, it is important that you adjust your approach when there is an incident. So you need to be very vigilant for, again, some of the core principles that I talked about. But at the same bit of time, you also need to be vigilant of how threat is evolving into your environment, especially when you're in the middle of the attack. While there are a lot of documentation, there are a lot of standards which are already available. You talk about NIST framework, you talk about other benchmarks which are available, and we can get into again those details, but it would be too complex. I guess to answer this, I'll put it in few bullet points. Let me first talk about one of the very important aspects, which is first and foremost is have a complete visibility to your CMDB. Not many enterprises do maintain CMDB to an extent that contains the utilities and each of the software and asset that is there into their environment. There are a lot of blind spots. We would have witnessed that into Log4j instance itself in the recent times, when people were aware of the asset classes that are there into their environment, but not where those utilities are applicable. And I guess that is where the difference lies. So you have to have up-to-date CMDB, which makes sure that you do not have blind spots. So I guess that knowing your environment becomes very, very elementary and very, very foundational. And that is where have one has to have up-to-date CMDB. And I'll also rub this point a little more, especially to highlight that what if you know in the initial few minutes that the attack has happened because of a particular ransomware family or a malware family, and by the virtue of you knowing that this is because of a particular ransomware or a malware family, you would also know their modus operandi and the target attack surface. What would be your first reaction and response? You would obviously like to know where all it is present into my environment, not only where it is under attack, but also where it could also propagate and have a lateral movement to my environment. So your response would be very, very fast if at all you do not have any blind spot and you have up-to-date CMDB right at few clicks. Then I guess there is no excuse of not having a up-to-date cyber emergency response plan. There is no excuse. There cannot be. And I guess that different people have it in different forms and shapes. But it is elementary. This is again foundational in place. Have your plan very much in place, no matter whether it works 100% or no. But unless you have it, you would end up having duplicate steps. You would end up having total chaos or confusion among the stakeholders when they are to respond. So it is very, very important to have your response plans ready, covering all possible scenarios that you could think of. Make sure that we remain agile and alert to the situation, because no matter how much preparation that you do, it is important that we have to readjust our approach when we are in the middle of attack. We always need to acknowledge one fact that we cannot prepare for a target attack. So while you are responding, who knows, adversary is also changing its tactic, and if that is so, your plan is bound to fail. And that is exactly why you need to remain vigilant. Your teams need to remain alert, and you need to agile in the way you are responding to that. So understand your monitoring events also which gives you enough cues to readjust your approach when something is going wrong. And for this purpose, I guess that you again need to move on to a very, very strong communication plan, which is where you need to know that who all you need to have communication with, who all are the parties and stakeholders who need to interact and for what purposes. Are we involving our business side stakeholders? Are we involving our insurance bodies? Are we involving our OEMs in the way we are doing the communication? In fact, I would even admire that your testing of your plans, while it is important and periodic testing is important, but do we involve our OEMs, our suppliers, our customers, our business stakeholders during this testing? Not many people do it. And that is, I guess, is one of the biggest mistakes that they do, because when something goes wrong, they become equal important stakeholder who provide you relevant information, or they could provide you relevant information and could become very, very handy to gain that speed. So I guess that also is very important. I would like to also add two more important points which I am able to again recall over and above what you of whether do you have plan or no, it has to be updated, it has to be tested, your communication plan. I guess a lot of people at times miss the documentation of the actions taken when there is an attack. So if at all, as I said, that we have to readjust our approach, we have to be agile in the way we are responding to the adverse situation. We take a lot of prompt or impromptu actions, and if that is so, make sure that you have the documentation up. Document You keep on documenting, your teams keep on documenting all that you're doing when you're taking action, because if at all something is to be rolled back, you know what you have done and in what sequence. So I guess that is something which becomes very, very important. Then obviously have those plans again up to date once this is over.
Yeah, sure. So the call to action has to be documented, and that's really important. So to sum it up, we can say like it can seem daunting to manage a constantly expanding attack surface, but leveraging the information that's already out there, creating a solid foundation of monitoring and execution in your organization, and spending time understanding how the enemy attacks can help you build up your defenses and keep your organization safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with this, I would like to thank you everyone for joining us today. And thanks, Mohit. We really appreciate your time and insights that you shared with our CISO TV audience.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Kalpana. Thank you, everyone.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.